hadn't planned on this. Not the way she smiled at me. Not the way her hand lingered a fraction too long on the counter as she stirred the sauce. Her kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary. A warmth that pressed against my chest in a way I didn't quite understand. I was supposed to be helping her. Just helping, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, keeping my distance. But there she was, mid-40s, moving with a grace that felt effortless. The kind of elegance that comes from years of carrying oneself like the world is both familiar and strange. She glanced at me over her shoulder, eyes that were soft but sharp, the corners crinkling with a subtle amusement. My hands trembled slightly as I passed her a bowl. "Careful," she said, voice low, almost teasing, as if she could sense the little pulse of nervous energy running through me. I nodded, but my gaze stayed on her, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her shoulders beneath the soft blouse she wore. She caught me looking and didn't look away, only lifted an eyebrow. There was a pause, a quiet beat, before she turned back to the stove, but my chest still thumped like a drum. She handed me a small spoon, saying, "Taste this. Don't let me do all the work." Her fingers brushed mine, just for a second, but enough. Enough to leave a spark. I held the spoon, tasting the sauce. Rich, smooth, with a hint of sweetness that reminded me of something I couldn't name. I swallowed and our eyes met again. She smiled then, a little crooked, almost shy, though it didn't fit her confidence. And I felt that strange, twisting pull, the kind that makes you want to lean closer, even when logic says to step back. "You always cook like this?" I asked, my voice a notch too quiet. "Sometimes," she said. Then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned a bit closer, brushing her elbow against mine. The contact was brief, accidental maybe, but my skin remembered it. My stomach flipped. She moved around the counter with a fluidity that made every gesture feel intimate. I watched her wipe her hands on a towel, her fingers lingering, the scent of vanilla soap and something warmer drifting into the space between us. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I chopped onions and pretended the knife was all that mattered. She laughed softly, a sound that lingered longer than it should, and I realized I was holding my breath. "Dessert's ready," she said suddenly, turning with a flourish. "But I made it just for you." I froze. Her words hung in the air, suspended between us, electric. My hand brushed the edge of the counter, and I felt the warmth of her near me like it could burn. She tilted her head, a little mischievous, a little vulnerable, and I couldn't look away. Then, without warning, the front door clicked open. A sound that should have been ordinary, but in that moment, it felt like a jolt of reality. We both turned, a flash of surprise crossing her face, her eyes widening just slightly before she caught herself. And just like that, the tension didn't vanish. It curled in the quiet kitchen, heavier now, thicker, leaving me wanting, waiting, and utterly aware that nothing would ever feel quite the same after tonight. I lingered by the counter longer than necessary, the knife in my hand suddenly feeling heavier than it had a moment ago. She was arranging plates, humming softly, the kind of hum that made it impossible to focus on anything else. And I realized, somewhere deep inside, that I was memorizing her. Every tilt of her head, the faint crease at her brow when she concentrated, the way her fingers brushed the edge of a plate just so. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't. She was my friend's mother, an unspoken boundary I'd never crossed before. And yet, every glance she gave me seemed to say something I didn't understand. I caught myself staring a little too long, and she turned, sensing it, though she didn't accuse. She only smiled, a half-smile that carried both warmth and restraint. "You always get quiet when you're thinking," she said, leaning a fraction closer. Her hand hovered over the counter near mine, fingers brushing my forearm by accident or design. I couldn't tell. I swallowed. "I'm just paying attention," I said, though I knew it sounded hollow. She laughed softly, but there was something fragile in it. "You always notice, don't you? The little things." I did notice. Everything. How her hair caught the light in subtle shades of chestnut. How her scent clung to the space between us. The faint tremor in her fingers when she lifted a spoon. We worked in near silence after that, the kitchen filled with only the clink of utensils and the hum of the stove. And yet, it wasn't silence at all. It was thick with everything unspoken. I wanted to reach out, to touch her shoulder just to see if it was real, but I held back, pretending to wash dishes. It wasn't just the age gap that made this complicated. There were layers, her past relationships, the quiet weight of years that made her guarded, the loneliness she hid behind casual conversation. And me, I wasn't naive. I understood what it meant to be drawn to someone like her. Someone who carried life in her eyes, someone who could see through the walls I tried to keep up. She stepped closer while plating dessert, our sides brushing. A breath of her warm, lightly scented with vanilla and cinnamon, washed over me. I could feel the faint pulse at the back of my neck. She looked down at the plate, then at me, then back again, lingering in the space between us. "Careful?" I said quietly, though my voice betrayed nothing of the tension twisting inside me. "Careful?" she echoed, her lips twitching. She didn't step away. Her hand rested a heartbeat too long near mine. The air between us throbbed in a way I couldn't name, a mixture of danger, desire, and something softer, something almost innocent. I wanted to ask her why she didn't pull away, why she stayed so close when propriety demanded distance. But the words never formed. Instead, I watched her, feeling the heat of proximity and the pull of unspoken connection. Then, in one small electric gesture, she set the dessert plate in front of me and let her fingers brush mine. A fleeting touch, a whisper of warmth, a promise unspoken. My chest tightened, and I realized that in that moment, whatever line we were skirting didn't seem to matter. And yet, as our eyes met and lingered, the world outside the kitchen reminded me that this, whatever this was both impossible and irresistible. The sound of a text alert made me jump. I'd been leaning just a little too close, trying to see how she tasted the dessert, the tip of her tongue brushing against her lips as she smiled softly. My pulse rattled in my ears. She glanced at my reaction, eyebrow raised, lips curved in a secretive half-smile. "I think that's yours," she said, her hand almost brushing mine as she nudged the phone toward me. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, glancing at the message, just a casual ping from a friend, but the timing felt like a warning. We laughed softly, a shared, nervous sound, and then the kitchen fell quiet again. Quiet except for the way my heartbeat seemed impossibly loud. I could feel her presence closer now, the faint warmth radiating off her side as she bent slightly to reach for a spoon. The scent of her perfume, something floral, gentle, and unmistakably hers, wrapped around me like a tether. I caught myself leaning a fraction too far, drawn to her in a way I couldn't name. She noticed. Her breath brushed against my cheek as she reached for a napkin, and I froze, aware of the dangerous closeness, aware that a single motion could shatter the invisible boundary we were skirting. "You're quiet," she said softly, voice almost a whisper. "I'm thinking," I replied, but my eyes didn't leave hers. The words felt hollow, inadequate for the thrum of desire and restraint filling the room. She tilted her head, studying me with something unreadable. And then, as if gravity itself had shifted, our hands brushed again. Longer this time. Neither of us pulled away, though we both should have. The touch lingered, electric, fragile, and terrifying. The thought of my friend, her son, loomed in the back of my mind. The thought of anyone walking in, seeing this, made my stomach knot with guilt. And yet I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't pretend the magnetism between us wasn't real. She leaned just a little closer under the pretense of adjusting the dessert plate, and I felt the heat of her body against mine. My hand twitched, wanting to hold her, to keep her there, but I didn't. We hovered in a space too small, the air thick with unspoken admission. "You should sit," she murmured, a soft command, but her eyes lingered on me as if daring me to ignore it. I obeyed, though my chest was tight, my thoughts scattered. And then, as I reached for the plate, our fingers met again, this time a little more intentional. Her warmth seeped into mine, a touch that promised everything without saying a word. I wanted to lean in, wanted to see if our lips would meet, but we held back, tethered by fear, propriety, and the impossible thrill of it all. Yet in that near touch, that near kiss, the line between restraint and surrender blurred. We pulled closer than ever without realizing, drawn by an invisible current neither of us dared name aloud. And as we finally exhaled, lingering in the silence, the world outside the kitchen, the friend, the responsibilities, the impossible expectations, felt simultaneously distant and suffocating. We were here, together, suspended, closer than either of us wanted to admit, and yet entirely unable to stop. The kitchen felt smaller than ever, the warm light casting long shadows that seemed to press us together. I couldn't remember the last time my chest had felt this tight, every nerve ending alert, every heartbeat echoing too loud. She moved to clear the last plate, and I realized I couldn't look away. Her hand brushed her hair from her face, and something in me snapped. I reached out almost without thinking, fingers grazing the strands, and the brush of skin against skin sent a shiver up my spine. She froze, just slightly, eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she looked down, as if ashamed, or maybe afraid of what we were both feeling. I started, my voice low, rougher than I intended. I shouldn't feel like this. She tilted her head, studying me in silence, her lips parting ever so slightly. Like what? She asked softly, but there was no innocence in the question. Something raw lingered in her gaze. Curiosity, longing, maybe even a little fear. I swallowed, heart hammering. Like, I shouldn't want you like this. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. And the moment they did, I felt the weight of them, the impossibility, the risk. Her breath hitched. She stepped closer, just a fraction, enough for our arms to brush, enough for the warmth of her body to radiate against mine. Every fiber of me wanted to close the gap, to lean in, to let the world fall away. And yet, we were frozen, poised on the edge of something irretrievable. You can't, she whispered, voice trembling but steady. Not like this. The honesty in her tone was almost unbearable. Her hand hovered near mine again, lingering in that liminal space where touch was promise, where desire was temptation. I wanted to take it, wanted to crush every restraint we had built. But the fear of judgment, of consequences, of everything that made this dangerous, anchored me in place. She leaned just slightly against the counter, a deliberate tilt that brought her closer, closer than any propriety should allow. I could feel her pulse against my side, the subtle exhale of her breath brushing the corner of my cheek. I wanted to speak, to tell her she was more than just a memory, more than a warning, more than an impossible temptation. But the words got lost in the tightening coil of tension inside me. Do you want me to stop? She asked, almost daring me to respond. I didn't answer, couldn't. Instead, I let my hand hover near hers, the air between us thick and charged, every nerve alive. The room felt like it was closing in, every sound, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, magnified. I wanted to close the last inch, to feel her lips, to finally bridge the unspoken chasm between longing and surrender. And then she looked at me, eyes heavy, lips trembling ever so slightly, and whispered, Are you going to? Or not? Everything froze. Everything waited. The world outside the kitchen, the reason, the risk, the impossible, fell away. And we were suspended on the edge, between desire and restraint, breathless, aching, and terrifyingly close to crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I was about to reach for the spoon again when my phone buzzed on the counter. A glance at the screen made my chest seize. It was a message from my friend. Not a casual one. A photo, a simple caption. Mom said dessert was just for you? I froze. My eyes lifted, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to her. She was watching me, her expression carefully neutral, but the faint tightening of her jaw betrayed something. I didn't mean... I stammered, words failing me. She stepped closer, the movement almost imperceptible, but enough that the scent of her perfume enveloped me again, warm, intimate, and intoxicating. Her hand brushed mine when she leaned to glance at the phone. Neither of us pulled away. The contact lingered, sending a shock through my veins. "You should have told me," she murmured, voice low, almost a whisper, but charged with something I couldn't name. Her eyes searched mine, as if trying to measure the depth of what had already begun between us. "I didn't know how," I admitted, cheeks burning, fingers curling around the counter as if I could anchor myself. "I didn't want it to matter." She bit her lip, a micro-gesture that made my stomach twist. Then, abruptly, she leaned just slightly toward me, closer than necessary, and the edge of her shoulder brushed mine. I felt the warmth, the electricity, the risk, and yet, she pulled back just a fraction, as if testing me, testing whether I would step forward or retreat. "I never thought you'd feel the same," she said quietly. Her voice wavered, and I realized that behind the poised confidence I'd admired was a raw vulnerability I hadn't fully seen before. I wanted to tell her everything, to erase the careful restraint, to confess that I had been watching her, memorizing her, thinking about her in ways I shouldn't. But the words stuck. Instead, I let my eyes trace the line of her neck, the curve of her shoulder, the slight tremor of her hand as it lingered near mine. She noticed. She stepped closer again, just enough to brush her fingertips against mine in a lingering, teasing touch. My pulse raced. Every instinct in me screamed to close the distance, to feel her completely, and yet the fear of judgment, of consequences, of what this would mean, anchored me in place. The kitchen was silent except for our shared breaths, short and shallow. We were so close that I could feel her exhale against the side of my face, warm and unguarded. It was unbearable and yet intoxicating. Then she looked at me, eyes wide, lips parted slightly, and whispered a single word that made my chest tighten. "Now!" And in that one word, everything shifted. The risk, the longing, the impossible attraction. It all became real, pressing against us, daring one of us to act first. I stepped closer, drawn forward by something I could no longer resist, and suddenly, the choice was no longer abstract. It was here, right now. The kitchen felt impossibly small, the space between us taut with unspoken words and raw energy. I could feel her breath, warm and uneven, brushing against my cheek. Her eyes held mine wide, searching, as if trying to read every thought I had. Every instinct in me screamed forward, yet caution lingered like a weight on my shoulders. "I shouldn't," she whispered, voice trembling but soft, the words barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. "Shouldn't what?" I murmured, my lips just inches from hers. The nearness made my chest ache, made my hands itch to reach, to close the impossible gap. She swallowed, and I saw the hesitation flicker in her eyes, the tiny tremble in her fingers. "This us? It's..." Her words faltered, unspoken meanings heavier than any phrase could carry. I reached out, my hand hovering near her face, trembling slightly before I brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The contact was electric, gentle, careful, and yet it tore through every rational thought I had left. She shivered ever so slightly, and I realized she wanted this as much as I did, and feared it just as intensely. We were silent for a heartbeat, suspended, the world outside forgotten. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the clock, became magnified. Her hand hovered near mine again, and this time, I took it, fingers entwining instinctively. The warmth of her skin, the softness of her grip, anchored me in the moment. "I don't want to lose this," I whispered, voice low, barely audible, though the words felt like a confession I'd been holding for months. Her gaze softened, vulnerability and desire mingling in a way that left me breathless. "Neither do I," she admitted. Her hand pressed lightly against my chest, just enough to feel the pulse beneath, and I felt something break. The careful walls, the restraint, the tension that had been building since the first glance. We leaned closer, drawn by a gravity neither of us could deny. The air between us was thick, heavy with want, with fear, with longing. And then, just before our lips met, the world seemed to pause. Time stretched, every second elongated by the weight of anticipation. Finally, we let go of restraint, of hesitation, of everything that had kept us apart. Our lips met in a moment that was soft and trembling, electric and unsteady, perfectly imperfect. It wasn't about perfection. It was about truth, about recognition, about finally surrendering to what had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. When we pulled back, just slightly, our foreheads resting together, breath mingling, I realized something profound. We understood each other now, fully, honestly, without pretense. The fear, the guilt, the impossibility. It all existed, but it didn't matter. Not here, not now. Her eyes met mine, a slow smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "So, this is real?" she murmured. "Yes," I whispered back, heart still racing, hand still holding hers. "Real." And for the first time, I believed it. The kitchen was quiet now, the earlier tension replaced by a warmth that wrapped around us like a soft blanket. We hadn't said much, words weren't necessary. Her hand remained in mine, fingers entwined with a familiarity that felt entirely new and entirely right. She leaned against me slightly, her head resting near my shoulder. I tilted my own, pressing my forehead gently to hers. The simplicity of it, the shared breath, the soft contact, the lingering heartbeat, felt like an entire conversation, saying everything we hadn't dared speak. "I was worried," she murmured, voice low, almost vulnerable, "about what this could mean." "I know," I said quietly, squeezing her hand. "I was too, but being here like this, I don't regret it." Her lips curved into a soft, relieved smile, and I realized the age gap, the social expectation, the caution. It didn't vanish, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the honesty between us, the quiet understanding, the way we could simply be. She tilted her head back slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and I felt the subtle warmth of her skin against mine. I leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple, a quiet promise that didn't need words. She closed her eyes, and in that instant, every hesitation, every doubt, every heartbeat of fear dissolved. We moved together naturally, sliding onto the couch she had been avoiding all evening, still holding hands, shoulders brushing. The room felt intimate, safe, and ours. I could feel her weight resting against me lightly, the rhythm of her breathing settling alongside my own. "Funny," she said after a long pause, voice soft and thoughtful. "I thought dessert was just for me. Now it feels like it was meant for both of us." I laughed softly, the sound mingling with hers, warm and unguarded. "Maybe some things are always meant to be shared," I replied, brushing my thumb across the back of her hand. We stayed like that for a long while, no need for more words, just the quiet comfort of being together, of finally letting the world outside fall away. The fire of desire had softened into something steadier, deeper, a connection built on longing, risk, hesitation, and finally, surrender. As the evening shadows stretched across the floor, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't expected. The tension, the waiting, the near misses, they had all led to this. And in this moment I understood her completely, and she understood me. She tilted her head up, resting her forehead lightly against mine. "So, are we really doing this?" she asked, voice playful but tender. "Yes," I whispered, heart full, holding her closer. "We are." And finally it felt simple, perfectly messy, human, and ours. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?